Hi guys, so I'm just going to do some final touches to today's painting. I'm going to begin by mixing some of my Payne's grey and paint in the fence detail. So I'm going to give myself space and turn my painting round and paint towards myself. So I've got quite a big brush, and I'm just going to lay a glaze of Payne's grey over the top of the ultramarine blue that's already down. Make sure to take it right to the edge of the painting. Even though I'm using quite a big brush, because it's a round brush, there's a nice tip and I can get good crisp edges on my lines, and I can control where the paint lies because there's a nice point to that brush. So I'm painting onto dry paper. Again, that gives me some more control over the paint. It doesn't move about. And I'm working quite quickly as well to try and prevent hard lines occurring in this little glaze. Okay, so that's the 3 posts painted, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'll just speed this up. So there I've painted the 3 horizontals. Now I'm going to do the same thing to paint the verticals. And the next thing to do is to switch to a smaller brush. So this one's a number 4, and I'm going to use some cadmium yellow. I might tone it down a little bit actually. This is actually what I used for my light wash, my original light wash for the horse. So that's toned down with a little bit of cadmium red and some of the Payne's grey as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the sides of the posts with the light hitting it. The sunlight's just catching the sides. Straight onto dry paper again, so effectively it's a glaze over the top of the blue. So it may well have a green tinge to it, but that's okay. And continue to do the same thing all the way to the end. There we go. So while I've got that kind of brown, pale brown colour on my brush, I'm just going to mix in a bit more of that yellow. I'm going to look at the sort of the highlights, if you like, the light cascading down onto this foreground area. So again, just turning my board a bit, and I'm going to paint in some lighter areas. This is my number 4 brush, nice and light. I'm just adding a bit more water there, bringing some of that light down. Where it hits the surface of the ground. Maybe a little bit more in that area. Because that's where I've already painted light in the tail there, so the light must be hitting the ground as well in that area. I've got a bit of a shadow line here, which is where I initially painted some grey. But I'm just going to leave that. And what I will do now is, I mentioned in class about using little specks to create pattern on texture on the ground. So that's going back into the Payne's Grey, nice and light, number 4 brush, and just putting in some little patches. I'm lightening it down a bit with some water, and just to create that sense of texture. I think it's sort of a sandy surface, so it's what's been disturbed by the horse. There we go, and I think that's all the detail really that I want to put in the foreground. So next I just want to sharpen up some of the shadows on my horse. So bringing back the Payne's Grey. Now this is my number 2 round brush, so a little bit smaller. And I want to sharpen up some of these shadows around his legs. And the hooves as well. So just going to apply an extra glaze of Payne's Grey in some areas just to tighten it up a little bit. It's just not quite dark enough in certain spots, so just by adding extra little layer you can get that sharpness and definition, of course, for the shapes. There's also this lovely crisp shadow here, just behind his elbow. It's this elbow joint that's casting a shadow on his chest area. To darken up the leg that's in the background there as well, that's a little bit darker. That's a bit better there. I might just darken up a little bit around this area. So that's his back leg, and you've got obviously his front buttock there. So it's just kind of going around your painting and working out what needs touching up. Now I'm just going to sharpen up some aspects to his head, and I want to get this mane right. So I think he's got some of the hair actually coming in front of his ear, so I'm going to get some of that in, just coming around there just a little bit. I haven't painted his eye in yet, so let's get that in, and also his nostril, which is really dark. He's got this bit that sticks down on his chin as well. So I'm just going to fade those marks out a little. Just a bit of water. Blend it in with what I've already got there. So it's just sharpened up some details on his face. And I'm going to put in a couple of marks around his eye. Just to sharpen that up. There's a nice dark shadow above his eye here. And his ears are a bit darker than what I have them as well, so let's get those ears in. And then finally, I think, just put some darker flicks across some of this light hair here, just for a little bit more definition. And I'm still using my number 2 brush. But the hair movement helps to show that you know, the horse is actually in mid movement, so the hair's flicking out. My brush is a little bit dry. Let's get some water on it. There we go. So you can use your little finger to help balance your arm, and just use these flicky motions and pull out some individual hairs. And then I'm just going to do the same thing on his tail, some slightly darker marks. It's very dark down the back here. So your number 2 brushes won't hold much paint, so you'll have to keep going back in, pick up more paint, so that you don't have these dry brush strokes. We're nearly there, I think. Just a little more. Perhaps darken it up slightly more. So layering up your shadows until you get that depth of colour that you want. It's really a good way to approach it rather than going straight in with very dark paint. It's nice just to build it up gradually, bit by bit. And then there's this shape here across the top of his hoof. Just want to define that area a little bit more too. Just darken that section a little bit. Now, quick look. I think I'm nearly there. The only thing is, this isn't quite working for me. So, with a very pale grey, let's have a look. Sort of needs to be. It's because his hoof is there, and I haven't really quite got the shape quite right. So I'm just trying to correct what I'd already painted, really, just to get that a little bit better. So I'm beginning to fiddle, which is not good. It's actually much higher up. I've just looked and it's a lot higher up here, this shape, but I'm kind of going to have to go with what I already painted, I think. And don't want to get into too much of a mess, so just extend it a little bit up there and blend it in a little bit with some water. So that I don't have too many brush strokes. Still not quite happy with that there, but it's never going to be perfect, guys. Don't be too hard on yourselves. This is really tricky, this one. There's just a couple of lighter shadows that I've noticed, so I just want to get those in. That helps define that curve under his belly, of course. Which is really nice. So just getting those lighter shadows in. It's a bit of a shadow just on the base of his belly, so pop that down as well. And I think, just looking at his head now, perhaps I could bring that round on his neck a little bit more, define the shape here a bit more. Again, it's trying to blend things with what you've already got down, so I think it's probably best not to fiddle too much. And step back, have a little look. And I think I'm happy with the sky. Mountains are okay. There's a little bit of a section down here actually that I wanted to look at because the blue just needs working a little bit to the edge of the tail there. So I've just wet it and now I'm just fiddling with my brush, gradually blending it into that area. Could always pick up a little bit of my blue paint, just blend that in. It was quite white there, and the same here, it's quite light, so just popping in a bit more of that blue, just so that it doesn't stand out so much. So if you've got any areas around your horse that where the paint's not quite meeting the edge, you can always tidy it up with a little brush. Now I was talking about the bushes earlier as well, so let's have a look at that. So I'm swapping brushes back to a number 4 now, And I'm going to pick up some of the cadmium yellow, and into that cadmium yellow, of course, we'll use ultramarine blue. So I've already got some on my palette, so I'm going to pick some of that up to create a green. So we've got blue down already, you know, so this is going to lay on top of that blue. So if you take your tester strip, put your green across that blue, so it's going to create quite a dark green actually, which is fine. And then you want to just be quite loose with this and dot it in. You can leave some little gaps for some light coming through, and you can make it fill the space, or, you know, bring it higher. Some of it's a little bit above actually, so just have a look at your reference image and use that as a guide. Just painting it on dry paper again. I'm using a bit of a dabbing technique, that's always good for foliage. And then you can kind of come in with a bit more blue here and there if you want to make certain areas darker than others. Dab in a bit more blue while it's still damp, and it will darken it up. So I'll just speed up this process.